species are stupid. Open species are less stupid, but they're still stupid. Let's talk about this. Hello to all my guys, my gals, and my non-binary pals, as well as everyone in between or otherwise. Man, I am just full of complaining, huh? I don't know why else you'd come to this channel. Please bear with the set changes, as I sort of lost the camera that I regularly record with because my computer won't detect it, and I have no idea how the audio quality is going to be with this video as well. So I appreciate you bearing with me and giving me a chance to work things out. Look, furries do some dumb stuff, and because the dumb stuff is kind of normalized in this fandom, people don't really talk about it. But guess what? I'm gonna talk about it. Again, this subject kind of ties into the last talk video I made with my friend Ellie, link in the description since annotations got nuked, about how duchies are kind of taking away the ability to freely use certain traits on even random animal characters despite being a specific open species. Before we dig too deep, here's what you need to know. Closed species are specific species with certain traits, abilities, and rules that are regulated by their creator. Oftentimes, closed species, especially popular ones, actually cost real human money to purchase the usage of certain traits and designs overall. A popular closed species that most would know would be a primogen. This is taken from the official descriptions of primogens created by Cool Koinu. Primogens are cyborg-like creatures with some key features such as a visor, full or partial head, a raptor-like body, and thick fur. Standard primogens follow this description. There are also hybrid primogens, which consist of similar artificial make, but crossed with another species. On the other hand, an open species is a species of creature with certain traits, lore, and descriptions that make them what they are, but all traits, rare or otherwise, are open to the public to create and use. Good examples of this are, on paper at least, duchies and manokits. Now, I've already done my bit on duchies and their effect on the community, so for this particular video, manokits will be the example of the open species. When protogens, we'll get to that in just a second. Manokits are a semi-aquatic species that were created by Dubmud. Their key features are a dog-like head, shark-like teeth, raptor-like body posture, dorsal fin, a shark-like tail, and fur. Manokits are typically seen with their eyes closed due to poor vision, and they're aquatic-based in nature and design, but they can't swim. Why? The difference between primogens and manokits is fairly obvious. Besides, the obvious. One costs money to make. Both species, however, have rules. A standard rule for most original species is that they have at least a basic set of rules to dictate the species itself. Here's where problems with species rules start to roll in. For example, say you want to make a manokit. Okay, well, they have shark-like features, right? Or that might mean that, hey, you want your manokit to swim. Guess what, though? Manokits as a rule can't swim. I have no honest to God idea why, but despite being half aquatic, whatever, it doesn't affect your character too much. Okay, so what? Your manokit can't swim. That's not too big of a deal, is it? This in itself might not be a problem, but think of it like this. The one rule that you might want to break, or like wanting your manokit to swim, or your duchy to have like internal organs, immediately excommunicates you from the species. The whole species. And then you proceed to become someone who ripped the species off because you didn't gel with one singular aspect of it. I don't think that's completely fair. At least when the rules are arbitrary. People say, if it looks like a manokit, and it acts like a manokit, then it's a manokit. Same with other open species like duchies and protos. A single arbitrary difference, like an angel dragon having flesh and blood, or a manokit having reproductive organs, is a really stupid reason for someone to be kicked from the species and then to be called a thief and a rip-off artist. Something else that's unfair is the way that certain species claim certain aspects of character design. Duchies, as previously stated, are the most egregious offender. Dutch Angel Dragon mods have made the following overall claims that, 1. If it looks like a duchy, it is one, despite most members of the Angel Dragon community not making any forward effort to differentiate the duchies anatomically from standard Angel Dragons, thus resulting in this confusion. No muzzle rings on any creature ever! Otherwise you're stealing from Eno! And number 3. All of the duchy species feeders are copyrighted, meaning apparently that if you have a fuzzy dragon that isn't a duchy, you're a ripoff artist? The mods are saying that the concept of fuzzy dragon is copyrighted. I didn't want to go into detail about duchies too much, since we already do have the last talk video when me and Ellie did our piece on it already. But as far as species laying claims over simple ideas, duchies really cannot be ignored. They take the cake. Manokits and protogens don't get a free pass. Phrases like Shark Dog and Bark Shark have both been applied to Manokits, and in the case of Bark Shark, circles as well. Which would make you think that Manokits are just one of many Canidsea species and that similar things are accepted. No! Manokits, while less aggressive in the things that the species tries to trademark, still seem to have the whole anthro-shark thing on lockdown. Like, most anthro-sharks have been mistaken for Manokits, if only once. I don't know if that's because anthro-sharks don't really look like sharks, but whatever. And lastly, we have the Primogen, which does unfortunately have an aggressive lockdown on the robotic fur concept. Robocore furs and characters have always been a thing, much like fuzzy dragons. Having a visor or a screen for a face has been something that is ages old thanks to sci-fi and simple great character design, and it still features on nowadays. However, Primogens, and to a certain extent, their much less expensive and exclusive cousins, the Protogens, seem to have created this sort of lockdown on Robocore features. Screen/visor faces, golden parts, mechanical torsos, and tails, etc. Especially for characters with raptor-like postures. The problem with these species isn't that they have these features. The problem is that they are trying to lay overall claim to them. People should be able to use design features regardless of where they originated. It limits creativity to have these things halfway regulated, much less have features behind a paywall. On the other hand, I understand that some people would like due credit for especially original, first-of-its-kind ideas. And you know what? That's fair. I understand that. Primogens are a really unique and cool species, and I can respect that the creator wants it simply for those close to them, as well as for themselves. Creators of Primas actually pulled a really cool trick for their close species, making a similar yet different enough open subspecies. This is where the Protogen comes in. They are specific enough to be recognized, but they're still highly modifiable. I have a proto that doesn't have the typical dragon head shape, but she's still recognizable as a Protogen, thanks to simple robotic features like a torso, faceplates, and visor. They're like Primogens, but more biological, allowing fur, skin, organs, and most of the same customization abilities. Most people who want a Prima are more than happy with a Proto. Protos offer an equally unique species with less regulation and definitely less cost. Protogens, however, are still mildly regulated. Lots of open species have these regulations to still consider them part of the species. And as long as the rules aren't arbitrary, usually these don't bother me too badly. However, Primas and Protos are not without fault. One quick glance at some of the more specific rules can be mildly alarming, to say the least. This rule is applicable to Primogens, which, may I remind you, are the highly expensive species that you must pay actual, tangible human money to get, and in copious amounts at that. Q. What happens if I become blacklisted and I own a Primogen? A. While you will get to keep the Primogen, it becomes invalid. You will be put on our master site block list with an image of the Primogen as well. Aspects of the design can be taken back as it is deemed an invalid Primogen design if the owner was blacklisted. Therefore, certain aspects of the design can then be used for future Primogen.
What? What the fuck?
What the fuck? Okay. The creators claim to reserve the rights to your character's design to be reinterpreted should you be blacklisted, which is a dumb concept in itself. And this is simply because you didn't follow the rules of the species? Not only is this absolutely abhorrent, it's theft and kinda hypocritical. The creators of Primas and Protos don't want their design aspects stolen by random species and characters. May I remind you, kinda basic features nowadays like robocore visors and what have you, which, yeah, they were popularized by Primogen, but they don't own the concept. But they see fit to literally steal and resell the designs of your characters that don't fit the criteria for the species. Now, if they were to label them not technically Primogen and call it a day, I understand. But literally taking the design that you came up with and repurposing it for later use in a species that can go into the thousands to be bought, that's the very thing that the Prima Proto creators are also afraid of. Theft of their original ideas. This is one of the worst rules I have ever seen in the furry fandom. The regulations here go from, yeah, right, I get it, to literal theft of designs rather than just labeling the creature as not a member of the species. And while this is the worst regulation for a widely known species I've seen, there are probably numerous other smaller species, such as the myriads of originals created on Instagram, that have equally stupid but not money-saving rules. An example of little regulation is with one of my favorite species, Coesutus. An example of little regulation is with one of my favorite open species, Coesutus. Coes were created by Rana, also known as Kaiju Coffee on Twitter, after the creation of their main sona, Fraps. There are two kinds of cohees: Grand Cohees, which is what Fraps is, and Standard Cohees, which is the regulated version of the species. The two are nearly fundamentally indistinguishable, except for one thing: the number of prongs in their eyes. Grand Cohees have 4 prongs, while Standard Cohees only have 3. As far as telling members of the species apart, this is the only visually defined feature. Of course, cohees do have species rules, but cohees keeping the closed species and the regulated species almost completely similar proves that it can be done with no arbitrary rules, like body posture or number of fingers. Yes, this is a complaint that I got on my protogen once. So we have closed species, heavily regulated species, and lightly regulated species. But what about species that aren't regulated at all? May I introduce you to the neighborhood cheesehead, the Sergal. Sergals are a fictional species that actually have roots in a comic series created by Mick Ono. The species itself has lore, an ongoing story, and they're entirely fleshed out. There are different varieties, color restrictions, design restrictions, everything that can be said for an established species with defining rules. As most Sergals in this fandom don't follow these rules at all. From complex and beautiful markings, multiple eyes, ears, tails, and even wings. These creatures are Sergal in name and head shape only. And yet, we still know them as Sergals, and the creator doesn't seem to mind. Why is that? I think the benchmark of a good species is the ability to tell it apart from other species instantly. Sergals have the obvious head shape, Cohees have the 3-pronged ears and hip wings, and Protos have the facial visor, shoulder, and hip screens. While I understand that having rules so that the species sticks to its designated lore is a good way for people unfamiliar with the species to create their first character as a good outline, I don't think it's fair that characters outside of the lore must adhere to these limitations. Why does a duchy have to be mentally 3 years old? Why can't a protogen have a dinosaur-like stature? Inherently, these rules are not a problem, especially if the character creator wants to adhere to the species lore. The problem arises when people in the fanbase police these rules and creation so aggressively that it affects the people and designs that are in no way related to the species rules in question. I think the worst part about this is that most of the time, creators are the least aggressive part of the community. Sure, creators are firm in their rules, but vicious policing is usually done by none other than members of the fanbase itself. In conclusion, I get close species to an extent. If they are truly original and they bring about a trend of certain character aspects, then I believe in credit where credit is due. However, if the fan bases of closed, or open, for that matter, species try to apply rules where they don't belong, then we have a problem. Custom species can come up with the concept and the origin of that concept in the case of the species lore. But the concept as a whole they cannot own and copyright. It's unfair to many who simply like certain aesthetics and don't want to adhere to the species rules. And if the rules are enforced so aggressively that the creators claim to have the right to steal your designs for reuse and resellability, most likely on a much grander scale, if they're the creators of the species, it's incredibly unfair and we need to call it out and address it for what it is. It's whack. What are your opinions about regulated species? And what's your least favorite one? My least favorite species are probably soda dogs. They're dumb. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know about those as well. Thanks so much for checking out this video, guys, and I'll get back to you very soon. You shoot for the moon. Bye-bye!